Hi, I'm Michael Cauley. Today I'm going to help you learn how to define yourself in your organization. I'm also going to show you how I got started making coffee when I really started learning all of the beautiful, wonderful things of the different coffee making systems. I'm going to show you the coffee making system that I got started with after drip, which was a French press. I'm Michael Cauley, and I help you bring more of who you are to what you do. As I mentioned in the first video, I started my career in the Northwest, but I really didn't start making coffee for myself at home other than just a drip coffee maker until I moved to Texas. And at that time, when I was in Texas, I couldn't get the same type of coffee that I had gotten in the Northwest, and so I started making coffee at home. And the first way that I started to brew coffee, other than a drip coffee maker, was with a French press. And as a lot of you have chatted with me about the YouTube videos and the channel and about your coffee making processes, what I've discovered is that for many, a French press is the first way that people begin to start making coffee once they move on from a drip machine. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the first way that I started making coffee, as well as talking about how to define self in an organization. But first, the coffee. So what we do is, my first French press that I got is that I just went to Starbucks and I bought a Bodum French press, and that French press worked really well for me. I had it for a really long time, and it had the little plastic carafe in it, and it worked well. It lasted a couple years, and then I would start going to the store and using the grinder that is right beside the coffee beans, because remember, I was still buying coffee beans at the store at that point. That's before I'd found out about Sleepy Monk coffee. And so I would go to the store and I'd look at all the coffee beans and pick out the beans that I wanted to try, and then I would pour the beans into the grinder that was there beside by the coffee beans. And then I noticed that on the grinder there was a little dial, and you would dial for drip or French press, and there were a couple other things that I didn't know what it was at the time, but I thought, oh, okay, it's French press. So I put it on the French press marker and grinded it, and noticed that the grind for a French press was larger than just a grind for a drip coffee maker. And so as you can see from these beans, the grind is a little bit larger. And the reason for that is because when you look at the screen on a French press, yeah, that mesh is pretty small, but you want to make sure that as few grounds get through as possible. I've never made a cup of coffee with a French press that did not have a few grounds in it. That's why I stopped drinking a little bit before the end of the cup when I'm drinking coffee with the French press. And so what we do is we take a few of these beans. I grounded the beans earlier because I didn't grind beans when I started making coffee with the French press. And I'm going to add not all of the beans, but about 3/4 of them, because this French press that I'm using today is a pretty small press. And so I grinded a little bit too many ahead of time. So I'm going to add just about 3/4 of the grounds, coffee grounds, and then we're going to add the hot water. And replace the plunger. Make sure you leave that plunger up. When I first got started, I'd push that plunger down right away. You don't want to do that. You want to leave the plunger up And then I also spin the lid so that the part that has the little vents where you pour, I just want it all closed off. I don't want any steam escaping. I want the coffee to be able to steep really nicely for 4 minutes. I put on a 4-minute timer, and then after that 4-minute timer is when we plunge the French press, and it moves all of those grounds down to the bottom of the press, and then we just do a pour into the cup. So in this video, the purpose of it is to talk about how to define self in your organization. And since that was such a journey for me, I'd like to share my story with you and kind of an update on my story. In the first video, I talked a little bit about how I started my career in theology and spirituality, and I was a pastor for 17 years. And the part I loved about being a pastor was loving people. Lots of people, all people, especially the people that didn't go to the churches that I pastored. And that was always a challenge for me. To be as present outside of church as in church. It wasn't the outside that I had a hard time with, it was the inside. I mentioned in the last video that I started a doctorate because I was trying to figure out how to solve a problem, and the problem was that millennials aren't engaged in church. And so I did a Doctor of Ministry degree, started in my late 20s, finished when I was 32, to figure out how to tell millennials that they are loved just as they are, because in my perspective, I believe that all people are loved just like they are by a higher power who created them. And I finished my doctorate, and I did well, and shortly after my defense, I was offered an opportunity to start teaching as adjunct at the seminary where I had just finished my doctorate, and I loved it. And I remember I loved teaching, and I remember that first night after that first intensive, I taught in a cohort model, and so students would come for 7 to 10 days, and I'd teach them, and my dad and I, we actually did it together, which was a lot of fun. We'd have other guest lecturers come in and present, and the end of that first day at 7:30, I fell asleep, and I slept all the way through until 6 a.m. the next morning. I mean, it was just like, when you're working really hard and you're really exhausted because you're working really hard, like that's what it was for me. And I knew that academia is where I wanted to be. I had been bored in school. I was the guy that sat in the back of the class the first time I went to graduate school and had the headphones wired up through my shirt and watched movies in the back of class. That was me when I did my first master's degree. And so next week I'm headed to Case Western Reserve University to start a Doctor of Management degree, and eventually leading to a PhD in designing sustainable systems. And so right now I'm doing a lot of reading, and my life has been reorganized. My early morning hours have been reorganized for reading. And so I wake up at 5 and walk into the living room of my house, flip on the light, and I just start reading, and I read for a little while until I make a cup of coffee, because making the cup of coffee helps give my brain a break so that I continue to absorb all of the great content that I'm enjoying reading right now. It brings me a lot of joy, and part of that is because I'm learning more of who I am, defining myself as an academic, defining myself as a practitioner scholar, so that I can continue to bring more of who I am to what I do. And so a lot has happened. The first is that it was in 2010 that after I finished my Doctor of Ministry degree, in order to really enter academia, I knew I would need to get a PhD. And but I applied. I applied to several programs, both in the States and in Europe. The programs I wanted to get into in the States, I was denied admittance. The programs in Europe that I wanted to get into, I got into, but it wasn't good for my family to relocate to Europe. And that was in 2012. I applied twice and to a school in the States, and in 2012, when I got denied the second time, I was told, you had 2 shots at this, and you're done. And so I gave up on a PhD. I gave up a career in academia 7 years ago. And 2 years later, I found myself going to school at the Hudson Institute of Coaching to become an executive coach, which was just a fabulous journey. It's when I was able to change from being a pastor to starting my coaching business. And what was so curious is that in life, as we define ourselves, because I continued to teach as an adjunct, right? So I was a pastor. I knew that wasn't a fit for me because I liked academia better, but I wasn't able to get into the PhD program to get eventually a faculty appointment. So I stopped and went to executive coaching school. But what was interesting is that even the coaching school created an opportunity for me to get back in academia. And so when I got finished my coaching certification, and I had started to enter the world of business, and I knew nothing about business. When I was in coaching school, I hid behind my notebook and Googled all of the acronyms just so I could keep up with what was being said. But I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn about business. I was making this trade. As I discovered more of who I was, as I defined myself, I moved from a career as a nonprofit leader toward a career as a leader in business and in management. And so I went to Benedictine University in Chicago and had a wonderful time with their Master of Science in Management and Organizational Behavior program. But I thought that was it. And then last year, I decided it was time to do the PhD. And there were some circumstances around that moved me in that direction. And so I started looking at PhD programs that I was interested in. And systems thinking at that time had really become meaningful to me, because I had written the book, which I'm still continuing to work on. And part of my YouTube channel is to build following for the book to get that published. And so I knew that I wanted to do a PhD in organizational systems. And 2 of the schools that I wanted to be at, I got accepted into one of those 2, and I'm just thrilled. And so for me, it's been 7.5 years since I was denied admittance for the PhD program that would have worked for my family in the field of religion. In February of 2012, that's when I shut that door, or I let it shut. And then in March of 2019, 7 years later, I was accepted into a doctoral program in designing sustainable systems, and I'm thrilled. And I'm excited to go to school. I'm excited to lean into it. And I'm excited that I'm continuing to learn more about who I am and learn more of how to do good work in the business world so I can help you bring more of who you are to what you do. I'm Michael Cauley, and I help you bring more of who you are to what you do. If you liked this video, please click the like button or comment, and I'd love for you to subscribe. The sooner we get to 100 subscribers, the sooner we can customize the name of the YouTube channel and start doing even more cool things. Thanks so much.